This episode is brought to you by my friend Rebecca Walser, a financial expert who can help you protect your wealth. Book your free call with her team by going to friendofdinesh.com. That's friendofdinesh.com. Coming up, I'm going to talk about Arizona and Attorney General Brnovich's intervention in what seems to be the election problems in Maricopa County with significant implications. A lot of the leftists who don't like Twitter anymore are fleeing to a site called Mastodon. I'll talk about what it's like to have a bunch of hall monitors on a left-wing site. And Mike Zhao is going to join me. He's the head of an Asian American group that's fighting against affirmative action. He also has a book about critical race theory and the Chinese Cultural Revolution. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Show.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Podcast.
What is happening with the midterm election results in Arizona? I think many of us know that that was let's just call it a deeply flawed election, far from the most secure election in history. And the results, there's some question now about whether they're going to be certified. The most important development here is that the Arizona Attorney General's office, this is Mark Brnovich, and also his Assistant Attorney General, Jennifer Wright, they have essentially called out Maricopa County. They've produced a demand and they've said, look, we've got hundreds of complaints, this is their quote, since Election Day. They go, this is first-hand witness accounts. So these aren't speculation or people who say this might have happened. These are people who were there. And by the way, there was a squadron of Republican attorneys there, and many of them have also personally testified to what went wrong. So what did go wrong? Number one, the breakdown of these tabulation machines. A lot of them. There's some debate about how many, but it looks like there were tabulating machine problems in 70 voting locations, and somewhere between 25 and 50% of these tabulating machines were not working. Now, here's what's weird. They were working for early voting when the Democrats were showing up to vote. They were tested right before Election Day. They were supposed to work, and then they didn't work. And they didn't work right at the beginning. So starting in the morning and continuing for most of the day. So tons of people were discombobulated, frustrated, in long lines. Some of them, basically in disgust went home. So within 30 minutes of voting, these problems began. Number two, the election officials in Maricopa County go, listen, no problem. We'll just segregate all these ballots, put them in a separate box. But as it turns out, they didn't do that. They took the separate box and intermingled the ballots with the regular box. And that means that if there was any reason to want to go back to identify those ballots, it's hard to do it. Why? Because you've now mushed them in with all the other ballots. Number three, there were duffel bags on hand, which were supposed to be used for tabulated ballots, but all these untabulated ballots were also tossed into duffel bags. So this is a big, giant mess. And finally, the Republicans who were on the scene all said that the net effect of this was, to use a phrase that, by the way, the left thinks it has patented for itself, voter suppression, which is to say that either through massive incompetence, but it's suspicious because, like I say, these machines work just fine. They were tested beforehand. And then on the very one day that Republicans turned out en masse to vote, major problems. Oh, the machines don't work. Put your ballot over there. We'll mix it in with a ballot over here. So I think that even Mark Brnovich's office, and Mark Brnovich has not exactly been Speedy Gonzalez on the issue of chasing down election fraud, but nevertheless, even his office is like, there's a problem here. By the way, a couple of the Arizona counties have already said, we're not certifying this election. And of course, the biggest county in Arizona is Maricopa County. So adding to all this, you have the weirdness that not only do you have all these election day problems, but then for reasons unknown, Arizona can't count the votes. Well, why not? When Florida counts a larger number of votes in a much shorter time and gives you the result on election day, why is it the case that it seems to have taken well over a week? In fact, they've just only now finished the basic counting. And so all of this creates, I think, just a breakdown of confidence in the integrity of the election. I'm not even mentioning the fact that Katie Hobbs is the Secretary of State overseeing, in a sense, an election in which she is participating. This is like, you know what, I'm going to be the referee, I'll shoot the gun, call the race, then I'm going to jump in and start running in the race, and then at the end I get to declare who's won the race. So what kind of operation is this? This seems to be like an absolute, almost a comedy, if you will, but a tragicomedy. And so a lot is riding here on what Brnovich does. There's a little part of me that suspects that it's all a show. Brnovich is just doing this. He's going through a ritual. Nothing is going to happen. In fact, I was talking to Debbie. She's like, believe me, Dinesh, what's our experience of these kinds of things? There's always our hope, some kind of investigation, and then nothing happens. So I think Debbie fears nothing will happen this time. What I'm hoping will happen, and I admit it's only a hope, is that Brnovich will call these people to account, and if they don't give him satisfactory explanations, which they don't have, he will go to a judge and tell the judge, in a sense, to overturn the election result, which is nothing more than to say that Arizona needs a new election.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and I'm excited to bring you my biggest bedding sale ever, just in time for Christmas. Get my Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $29.98. A set of pillowcases, only $9.98. Rejuvenate your bed with a MyPillow mattress topper for as low as $99.99. We also have blankets in a variety of sizes, colors, and styles. We even have blankets for your pets. Get duvets, quilts, down comforters, body pillows, bolster pillows, and so much more, all at the biggest discounts ever. I know my bedding products are perfect for you, and I'm extending my money-back guarantee for Christmas until March 1st, 2023, making them the perfect gifts for your friends, your family, and everyone you know. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen, use your promo code, and you'll get huge discounts on all MyPillow bedding products, including my Giza Dream bed sheets, for as low as $29.98. Get all your shopping done now while quantities last.
Yesterday, I tweeted out that the censorship on Twitter was not a uniform censorship, but a one-way censorship against conservatives, that leftists were never banned. And Elon Musk replied to me, and he goes, correct. And of course, that magnified the reach of my tweet, which was seen by tons of people. And it turns out that a lot of these woke leftists on Twitter who are angry, they're not angry by the way that they are being censored. They're not being censored. They're angry that they don't get to censor other people. And some of them are like, well, Twitter has become a very hateful place. Let's go to this other platform, which I'd never heard of, quite frankly. It's called Mastodon. And what's funny about Mastodon is that it's all these leftist hall monitors, if you will, are now on Mastodon. And they're all trying to cancel each other. So it's really fun to watch because one guy says to another guy, you know, well, you're not sufficiently, you don't have sufficient allegiance to the trans issue. You need to be banned. And then the other guy goes, well, I don't want to be banned because of some activist. And the guy goes, you can't call me an activist. I'm a journalist. And so all of this is going back and forth. One guy was essentially kicked out of a journalistic platform on Mastodon for calling another guy a bootlicker. And so, you know, banning is the name of the game here. In fact, I was telling Debbie, I had a clever idea, and that is I'm going to go on Mastodon myself. Now, I'm not going to go on as Dinesh D'Souza because I'd be banned instantly. I'm going to go on as this kind of super woke Asian Indian guy. Just between you and I think I'm going to use the name Kumar P. Kumaraswamy. That's me. Debbie's like, you can't give it away. They'll know it's you. Well, this is kind of between us. Don't let the cat out of the bag. But my idea is to go on as a super woke guy on Mastodon and demand that everybody be banned because they're not sufficiently woke. And I don't know if that's going to work, but there are even progressives who basically have tried Mastodon and they realize that the platform is just, how horrible it is to be on a platform where ultimately everybody's trying to cancel everybody. Here's Nate Silver, who's the founder of the website 538. He's a pollster. And he goes, honestly, if Elon gets all the hall monitors to migrate to Mastodon, that might be his greatest contribution toward the betterment of humanity. So here's a somewhat surprising statement, somewhat in defense of free speech coming from Nate Silver. But Mastodon is like what you could almost call it a circular firing squad. Everybody sits in a circle. They pull out their sort of, you could call it censorship weapons, and they start blasting each other off the platform. And this is what Twitter would be like if it wasn't for Elon Musk. Twitter was actually moving in this direction. So it is marvelous to see. And by the way, a lot of the journalists who went to Mastodon, they somehow thought that Elon Musk was going to blow up Twitter. I find it particularly funny that people who, make $70,000 a year as like business consultants or pundits are telling the richest man in the world how to run a business. Oh, Elon, this is never going to work. This is really going to blow up. I think Elon Musk really knows what he's doing. And Elon Musk has been pointing out that Twitter is actually getting traction like it's never seen before. And naturally so. Why? Because it's exciting to be on a platform where you can hear different voices. And it's exciting to see this kind of clash of ideas and the repartee that goes back and forth. So it's a fun platform to be on. But you can't go to a progressive and say it's fun. Why? Because the progressive's answer is, no, it's not fun for me. It's more fun for me to ban you. So that's what really gives these freaks a sense of pleasure. It is the power that they get to exercise over their political opponents. So look, I think it's really good that some of these people, this is sort of like all the village busybodies in an ancient village deciding, listen, we'll create our own village. Then we'll all tear down each other like crazy. And that's basically what Mastodon has become. It's a separate village for village gossips and village censors and village busybodies. And the effect of all of them congregating in that village is that all the other villages, and in this case I'm thinking specifically Twitter, are freer for the rest of us. Debbie and I are foodies, and I'd like to tell you about Moink. That's moo plus oink, gives you Moink. You choose the meat delivered in every box. Moink delivers grass-fed and grass-finished beef and lamb, pastured pork and chicken, and sustainable wild-caught Alaskan salmon straight to your door. Moink farmers farm like our grandparents did, and as a result, Moink meat tastes like it should because the family farm does it better. The investors at Shark Tank were right. This is a delicious way to get fresh meat without having to buy it at the grocery store. I especially love the salmon, and I'm getting a little hungry just talking about it. Keep American farming going by signing up at moinkbox.com/Dinesh right now, and my listeners will get free filet mignon, in every order for a year. Wow, that's 1 year of the best filet mignon you'll ever taste, but for a limited time. It's spelled Moink, M-O-I-N-K, moinkbox.com/Dinesh. That's moinkbox.com/Dinesh. My son-in-law, Brandon Gill, is here. I had Danielle, his wife, on the podcast yesterday. And Brandon runs a social media company and is also editor-in-chief of the DC Inquirer. And we thought we'd talk about a couple of the issues in the news. Brandon, great to have you. This is awesome. Let me start by asking you about this. CBS News has apparently authenticated the Hunter Biden laptop now. After all this time, they're like, yeah, we've looked at it and we know it's legit. I mean, this is something kind of comical, right? Because you had this massive denial followed by censorship, followed by all those national security figures coming out and declaring that this is Russian disinformation. And that people who quoted the laptop are peddling conspiracy theories, and now the conspiracy has been validated.
Right. Well, it's a wonder anybody even listens to these people anymore. I mean, that was October of 2020 that we knew this was real, and it was censored across every single platform, and you were kicked off of social media for saying this was true. And now, 2 years later, CBS is finally waking up and realizing that it was all all verified all along. So
I mean, it's like here's a news organization getting to the news later than everybody else.
Right.
This is the opposite of like getting the story first. They're getting the story last, and you can almost see that they've been dragged kicking and screaming to admit that it's true.
Right. And these are the guys who disparage free speech on Twitter and say that, you know, you need to listen to us, verified news organizations, as opposed to random people on Twitter. Well, it turns out the random people on Twitter were the ones who were right all along.
Let's turn to Amy Coney Barrett. Apparently, here's an article in the Guardian saying that a bunch of gay rights groups are calling on Amy Coney Barrett to recuse herself from a case that is coming up. Now, the case focuses on a Christian website developer named Laurie Smith. And she basically says, look, I'm not going to develop these LGBTQ sort of websites. They violate my right to free speech and my right to conscience, goes against my religious faith. So what I find kind of amusing here, well, first of all, there are a whole bunch of Catholics on the court. Amy Coney Barrett's not the only one, but they're claiming that she belongs to a group that is kind of a Catholic charismatic group. And she's also on the board of this group called Trinity Schools, a private group of Christian schools affiliated with the People of Praise. And they're saying this is an anti-LGBTQ group. What do you make of this?
Well, I mean, what they're advocating ostensibly is a standard of recusal that's so broad that it's completely unworkable. I mean, like you're saying, if any judge has to recuse themselves if they're Jewish, for example, on any case regarding Judaism or the Jewish faith, that's unworkable. If every Christian judge has to recuse themselves on matters of faith or anything to do with the church, we don't have a Supreme Court anymore. I mean, and that goes both ways too. I mean, do secularists have to recuse themselves on cases of LGBTQ or any other thing regarding secular liberalism? I mean, it's so broad that it's not workable, but I think we tend to look at this a little bit differently than the left does. So the left, I think, looks at this and they say, we have a justice and we think we know how she's going to rule on this case, and we don't like how she's going to rule. So what can we do to get her off of the case and get the Supreme Court to rule the way we want it to rule? So they say, okay, that's the starting point. They're not starting from, we want to have a fair judicial process. We want to, both sides bring their arguments to the table and see who's right and see who's most in line with the Constitution and with the law. They're starting from, here's how do we get the outcome that we want, and we'll do whatever it takes to get that, even if that means extreme anti-Christian bigotry and a blatant disregard for the Supreme Court and its independence and the rule of law.
I mean, you're making, I think, a very subtle point, which is as conservatives, we are often pointing out double standards. Like, listen, they want Amy Coney Barrett to step down because she's a Christian. Well, hey, you've got self-declared lesbians on the court. Why shouldn't they step down? Aren't they biased in the opposite direction? But you're saying that in a way, even that kind of thing is pointless because the left doesn't care about creating a uniform standard of impartiality. For the left, it's a political fight straight out. It's a matter of the votes. And so they go, listen, if we can get, Clarence Thomas to step down because of what his wife Ginny said in the 2020 election, let's do that. If we can get Amy Coney Barrett, it is the sheer ruthless opportunism of the left. And of course, I hope that Amy Coney Barrett I don't think she is dumb enough to fall for it.
Right, of course not. Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll be right back. Is there any question America is in decline? Crime and inflation are skyrocketing. It sometimes seems really daunting, but don't lose hope. If you're a senior, you remember better than anyone how strong America can be when we work together. That's why I urge you to join forces with AMAC. This is the Association of Mature American Citizens. AMAC exists to enrich the lives of all seniors and uphold freedom for all Americans by fighting for conservative causes. Membership comes with discounts on hotels, restaurants, cell phone service, and much more. And my friends at AMAC offer advisory services on things like Medicare, financial planning, and Social Security. Becoming a member is only $16 a year. Go to AMAC, that's amac.us/Dinesh to sign up today. Debbie and I are proud members of AMAC. You should be too. Go to amac.us/Dinesh now. I'm here with Brandon Gill. We're talking about issues of the day. So, Brandon, this is kind of interesting. Apparently, China, the Chinese regime, has created these sort of stealthy or not advertised as such police stations around the United States. And the goal is to exercise an external control over the Chinese population in this country. How do we know about this? This came up with the FBI director, Christopher Wray, and he said, in effect, yeah, I know about this. This is actually going on. He didn't say what he intends to do about it, but let's talk a little bit about what's going on here. I mean, it seems odd on the face of it to have a foreign country, let alone an adversary, implanting not just spies, which is to be expected to some degree, but institutions like a sort of a police force that's going to, I guess, ensure conformity of the Chinese population and maybe subservience to the ideology of the communist regime.
Right. Well, I mean, it's a blatant denial of American sovereignty. I mean, think of how many people have fled China to flee communist oppression, and they come here and they realize that the CCP has police stations in major American cities who are watching them, who are surveilling people in our country right now. I mean, it's absurd, but I think some of the leftist critiques of this, they're kind of up in arms saying it's ridiculous that a foreign country has, a police presence here. We don't like the authoritarian Chinese government being here, but it kind of rings hollow because for the past 30 years, the Democrat Party has pursued policies that have consistently eroded American sovereignty. I mean, think about the border. We've had an open border basically for 30 years, and it's much more open under Democrat administrations than under Republicans. But that's not an accident. That is the actual policy of the Democrat Party, is to erode American borders, erode American sovereignty. Now they're pushing to have illegal aliens, foreign nationals voting in American elections. So if you have foreign nationals voting in New York or San Francisco, like the Democrat Party wants to, it's really not a stretch to say that a foreign country can have a police presence here. I mean, foreign nationals, if you take them at their word, should dictate who runs our government. So it's really kind of just an extension of policies that the left has been pushing for the past 30 years.
I mean, what you're saying, I think, is that the ideology of unwinding American sovereignty and obliterating the things that make America a self-governing society, this is being pushed across the board by the Democratic Party. Now, admittedly, in some areas, you have Republican collaboration, right?
Right. Oh, of course. I mean, I think our border has been open, and it was hitting record levels in the mid-2000s, and Republicans did almost nothing to stop it. I mean, we've seen Republican economic policy has embraced outsourcing blue-collar jobs to China. We've watched our heartland get absolutely gutted, and the Republicans have done very little about it, at least historically. Now, come 2016, Donald Trump hits the scene, and he calls out a lot of this stuff. And remember, prior to 2016, we were seeing things like this. We were watching the border was wide open. Our jobs were being shipped overseas. Nobody really said anything until Trump came. And now this is a major national issue. But even now you see, I mean, one of the largest social media companies in America right now is TikTok, which is essentially a spying organization for the CCP. I mean, they know everything that you're looking at. They know who you are, and they know your location. And there's a lot of really insidious things they can do with that data. And we've kind of just allowed it to happen. We've allowed that to grow and to poison the minds of our children.
I mean, one thing I find very telling about TikTok is that apparently in China, TikTok has a lot of educational videos. It's all about modesty, decency, doing your homework, learning things, science, math. Very different than the TikTok here. It's almost as if TikTok is a weapon of making Americans more sexualized, more stupid, more obsessed with triviality. But the Chinese are not doing that to their own citizens.
Right. They know what TikTok is, and apparently we don't. I think there's a view too often that we're sort of operating on level playing fields, that we both have good intentions. They want free trade to to kind of get themselves into an economically stable position. And part of that means shipping American jobs overseas, but we get cheap stuff. That's not the case. Like, they are looking out for their own self-interest, regardless of what happens in America. And to a certain extent, it is a zero-sum game. When America declines, China rises.
This business with the police stations, I mean, is there anything that can be done about it? I would imagine that we can basically say, listen, we have our country, we have our own laws, and we have our own police force. And so we're not going to stand for the Chinese doing this. And so it would seem to me that the FBI, instead of spending its time on January 6 cases, a total waste, is make sure you get to the bottom of this and dismantle these violations of U.S. sovereignty.
Right. The only way to solve this is a zero tolerance policy. We cannot have foreign countries having any kind of police or surveillance forces within our borders, and that's the only way to get rid of this.
Well, this then becomes, I think, an agenda for Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy is doing a lot to try to shore up his position as leader. By the way, I've seen a number of Republicans are like, we are a hard no on McCarthy. McCarthy may not have the votes. But at this point, he's trying to say, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this. And maybe one thing that he needs to add to the list is checking on these Chinese police stations in the United States so that we have the full story of what's going on and can put some pressure on the Biden administration to act. What some of us would do just to be young again, hey, the simple things like climbing stairs, getting in and out of bed, taking a walk aren't sometimes all that simple. Why too many aches and pains? But they can be, because thankfully now there's a 100% drug-free solution. It's called Relief Factor. Relief Factor supports your body's fight against inflammation. That's the source of aches and pains. The vast majority of people who try Relief Factor love it. They order more because it works for them. Debbie is a true believer. She can finally do the exercises she likes, planks, push-ups, a stationary bike, all thanks to Relief Factor. It's been a real game changer for her and for so many other people. You too can benefit. Try it for yourself. Order the 3-week quick start for the discounted price of only $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com or call 833-690-7246 to find out more. That number again, 833-690-7246, or go to relieffactor.com. Feel the difference. Guys, I'm really delighted to welcome to the podcast Mike Zhao. He is the president of the Asian American Coalition for Education, and this is the group that's really exposed the Ivy League's racial discrimination against Asian Americans on the national stage. Mike grew up in communist China. He survived the Cultural Revolution, and he was a legal immigrant to the United States. He came in 1992. The website is asianamericanforeducation.org, asianamericanforeducation.org. And the book, Critical Race Theory and Woke Culture. Critical Race Theory and Woke Culture. Mike, welcome to the podcast. I'm delighted to have you. We're familiar with this woke ideology in the United States. And of course, the Supreme Court is taking up this issue of affirmative action. I'm actually happy to see. But I think what you bring to this debate is not only an intellectual knowledge, but a personal experience of China, of the Chinese Cultural Revolution, and of an attempt to install a kind of socialist ideology throughout a whole society. Talk a little bit about your background and your experience of the Chinese Cultural Revolution, and then we can look to see if there are some similarities or traces of it that we can find in a different form here in the United States.
Dinesh, thank you for having me. I grew up in communist China. During Cultural Revolution, my father suffered political persecution. He lost freedom for 6 years, and he was tortured and extended the whole family because my grandparents they used to be landlords. They were deprived of the right to continue living in the city. Were forced to relocate to poor mountain villages where there was no tap water no electricity, no nearby clinic. My grandma suffered a heart attack months later and died years later because of this kind of political persecution and extreme poverty. And my mom also passed away. So I endured extreme poverty, political persecution in China. In 1992, I escaped to America and I worked all the way, become director of global planning at Siemens Energy. Achieved my American dream. So that's the reason, as soon as I saw the Black Lives Matter launched a violent demonstration 2 years ago, and also top down the statue of Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, I call it out, the America's Cultural Revolution.
So in other words, what you're saying is that, I mean, there obviously are going to be enormous differences of time and place. The Chinese Cultural Revolution began under Mao, and I guess to some degree it's still going on today, isn't it? In other words, would you say that the purpose of the Chinese Cultural Revolution was to establish an iron grip on Chinese society? In other words, what was the reason for telling your grandparents, listen, get out of the city, you go live in the mountains? What was the government trying to achieve by making your family do that?
Basically, what happened was the communists, right, invaded China. They, they adopted the Marxist class struggle theory. They view the landlords, capitalists as their threat, as class enemy. So they, as you said, they want to establish iron grade society to control everything in China, including people's ideology. That was what happened. I want to say similarly, it's happening in America right now.
All right, let's turn to the American situation, and let's talk first just about affirmative action. I mean, are you astonished to see that after this country goes through a civil rights movement, outlaws the idea of systematic racial discrimination, declares racial discrimination to be evil when it is embedded in the laws, and then turns around almost immediately and creates a new system of racial discrimination, except its targets now, I would argue, are primarily Asian Americans, partly because Asian Americans perform so well, but secondarily also white. So in other words, there's discrimination in favor of some groups and against other groups.
I was totally shocked. I learned this in 2014. I want to say first, I admire your early fight against that. And then, as soon as I learned that, it really was in contrary to what I believe as the American dream, which promised each U.S. citizen have an equal opportunity to achieve success and prosperity through hardworking initiative and determination. The affirmative action basically treat Asian and white American, in an unfair way. So that is against the spirit of the American dream.
Let's take a pause, Mike. When we come back, let's dive into the multiple similarities between the Chinese Cultural Revolution and woke ideology in the United States. Debbie and I try to eat healthy, but I'm not a huge fan of the flavor of veggies. But I have to admit, when I'm in the produce section of the grocery store, well, all the vibrant colors of fruits and veggies look really good. Now, Dr. Howard at Balance of Nature told us that all those colors you see in the produce section equal nutritional variety. Different colors signify different key nutrients. So if you eat only your favorite 1 or 2 veggies, well, you're missing a whole world of vital nutrients. And this is why Debbie and I take these 6 little fruits and veggie capsules every day. Each daily dose is made up of a blend of 31 different fruits and veggies. That's the only way we can possibly get what we need. So give your body everything it needs with Balance of Nature. For a limited time, all new preferred customers get an additional 35% discount and free shipping on your first Balance of Nature order. Use discount code AMERICA. Call 800-246-8751. That's 800-246-8751, or go to balanceofnature.com and use discount code America. I'm back with my guest, Mike Zhao. He is the president of Asian American Coalition for Education. By the way, that website, asianamericanforeducation.org. Mike is also the author of Critical Race Theory and Woke Culture. And I've just dived into this book, and it is fascinating. It begins with a section on the Chinese Cultural Revolution. It then turns to the way in which the Marxist playbook, which was used in China, is now being used by the radical left in America. Mike, let's talk about when we compare the Chinese Cultural Revolution to American woke ideology. This isn't just a matter of racial preferences. You trace multiple similarities between the Chinese Cultural Revolution and what's going on here. Let's talk about a couple of those similarities that you see.
Sure. The first all originated by Marxist theory, right? In China, Cultural Revolution, use Marxist class struggle, economic Marxism to divide the Chinese people into oppressors and oppressed. In America, the radical left use critical race theory, which is cultural Marxism, to divide Americans into the, oppressors and oppressed. Also, they use the same terminology, like woke. This word is not invented in America. It was already happened in China about 60 years ago. If somebody was indoctrinated by communist class struggle theory, that guy was called have 觉悟, means that guy was woke, right? So the similarity. Also, as you said, similar playbook. Divide and conquer, already mentioned. Also uses back in China, the communists use censorship and the concentration camp to silence the political opposition. Here, America, the radical left, use censorship, cancel culture to silence the conservative, the political opposition. Also, the changing the history, changing the culture, rewriting history. During Cultural Revolution, the Red Guards, destroy all Chinese cultural heritage. Here in America, Black Lives Matter and radical left top down the statue of Thomas Jefferson and of George Washington. They also invented the so-called 1619 Project, trying to rewrite American history. Very importantly, back in China, they use the class struggle theory to really indoctrinate the citizens of whole nation. Here, the radical left try to use critical race theory, which is a racial struggle theory, to indoctrinate our children K-12 nationwide. And then finally, they both launched the violent demonstration, try to attack the American as a government institution, like defunding police is an example. So in my book, I list 6 similarities. What I just mentioned are among the highlights of that.
Wow, this is fascinating. Let's focus on the first point that you made, which is divide and conquer. And as I understand it, what you said is that in China, drawing straight from Marxist ideology, you divide the whole society into 2 groups. There are the oppressors and the oppressed, right? Obviously, in China, presumably, the racial element was not so central because the Chinese people belong, by and large, to the same race. But in America, it looks like they take the same divide and conquer, the same oppressed and oppressed, but in America, they have divisions based on class, but then they add divisions based on race, divisions based on gender, divisions based on sexual orientation. So it looks like in America, it's multiple lines of division that are being exploited by the left, whereas in China, perhaps it is only one line of division, the class division.
That is correct. And as a matter of fact, it's kind of evolution of the Marx theory, right? And initially, Marx theory was focused on class, struggle, economic division. And then, the Frankfurt School back in Germany, they invented a critical theory, and later on critical race theory totally transformed the Marxism from economic Marxism to cultural Marxism. Marxism. So they try to attack the culture of capitalist society, using that to top down our funding principle, also the political structure of America. That is what the essence of the current world culture.
Mike, let me ask you this as we close out. A lot of times when immigrants come to America, they want to make a better life. They live in immigrant communities. They are not connected to the larger society in a very active way. Do you think that the Asian American community and the Chinese American community is waking up to the fact that its real political adversaries are not the right or the Republicans, but is this radical left? Are the Chinese Americans in this country, in your experience, getting that message?
Yes, absolutely. Not only myself, many other Chinese Americans already stood up fighting against the Cultural Revolution in America, like Xi Van Fleet in Virginia, also some Chinese parents in California. Actually, we are waking up fighting against affirmative action, and also in California, San Francisco, Asian Americans rise up, record their school board member, record of radical DAs. You are exactly right. Asian Americans are rising up, really try to come out to cherish, to defend the America's founding principles.
Mike, this is great news, very encouraging, and I commend you for stepping forward and taking a leadership role in, I think, this very important project. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, and love to have you back sometime.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to talking with you.
Karl Marx once called religion, or belief in God, belief in the supernatural, the opiate of the masses. Now, what did he mean by this? What he meant is that human beings tend to want to avoid the challenges and contradictions of life. They don't like the idea of taking up the revolutionary cause. All of that takes a lot of effort. So we try to comfort ourselves with an illusory idea that, hey, there's no justice in this world, but that's okay because we'll get it in the next world. So it's a postponement of, you may say, social justice from this world to the next. Now, this idea from Marx is not original with him. In fact, he lifted it almost wholesale, almost verbatim, from the German philosopher named Feuerbach, Ludwig von Feuerbach. And Feuerbach's idea was that God doesn't actually create man, man creates God. So what man does is man takes all the good things in life that man actually wants and projects them onto God. So God is now identified as the God of wisdom and the God of goodness and beauty and justice, and all the bad things man keeps for himself. So in a sense, Feuerbach saw the belief in God as a form of self-hate, of man actually turning against himself, giving to God, this, in a sense, imaginary God, all these human virtues, and keeping for man himself all the human evils and vices. And Marx then borrows from Feuerbach and comes up with his critique. So we're seeing here how in the 19th century, we begin to see the emergence of a real secular and in some degree atheist attack on religion. And it's an intellectual attack which tries to explain away religious belief, but it's also a moral attack. It blames religion for the crimes of history. Look at the Inquisition, the Crusades, the religious wars, the Salem witch trials. And the idea is that a kind of a religion-drenched society is very unhealthy and very dangerous. And this applies really in some ways, I guess, to all religions, but specifically to the Abrahamic religions, religions like Islam and Christianity. You could argue that maybe Hinduism and Buddhism are kind of in a different, they haven't had religious wars in the same way. And so this is a critique that has gathered force and is, of course, very familiar to most of us. Probably the most important of all the atheist thinkers is the philosopher named Friedrich Nietzsche, who I'll be talking about a fair amount as our little apologetics course churns on. And Nietzsche was a very different character than, say, Darwin. Darwin was a kind of a dull fellow, a guy who said, basically, I've got this alternative explanation. It's called evolution. And human beings, after all, are kind of continuous with the animals. We're not fundamentally different from the animals. And in fact, that's how we got here. And Nietzsche, who in a sense embraced Darwinism, he didn't seem to have any fundamental critique of evolution. He didn't really like it, and he didn't really like Darwin. And in part, he didn't like Darwin because he says that Darwin is this kind of dull Englishman. And Nietzsche's own critique was very different. Nietzsche's view was ultimately that Christianity and belief in God are a kind of, they reflect hostility to life itself. They convince people to deprive themselves of what life has to offer. And so you think, for example, about the monks and priests through all the centuries who are like, listen, I'm not going to eat too much food because it's going to make me a glutton, and I'm going to abstain from sex. I'm going to make a vow of celibacy. So, in other words, what you have is this sort of ascetic impulse in Christianity. Now, that's not present in all branches of Christianity, but nevertheless, it was present in the Catholic and Lutheran branches that Nietzsche was familiar with. So he goes, this Christianity is a denial of life. And essentially what Nietzsche championed is the opposite, a kind of, he says, we sort of have to go for life. We've got to embrace danger. We've got to pursue what life has to offer. And he didn't just mean the sort of pleasurable life, because you can imagine kind of an Epicurean lifestyle where you essentially sit around and, go to buffets every day and live a very comfortable, secure. But for Nietzsche, no. He said his philosophy was a philosophy of, he called it ice and tall mountains. And what he meant by this is that you got to take a lot of risk. In a sense, he almost thought that you could rise above humanity. You could create, human beings could, a better kind of human being. Not better in the sense of more virtuous, but stronger, more daring, more creative, more adventurous. These are the kind of terms that Nietzsche embraced. And of course, Nietzsche is the author of the famous phrase, whose meaning we will dissect later, the death of God. It actually doesn't mean what you think. It's not Nietzsche saying basically, hey, listen, I'm here to declare that God doesn't exist. First of all, that would be unoriginal. There are many people who said that before Nietzsche, and you'd hardly be famous for saying something so banal that it would amount to nothing more than a kind of negation of God. The death of God is actually a different kind of idea, which we'll get to later. So what's emerging out of this is that we have a critique of God and Christianity that says that if you want to live the truly intellectual life, you don't need God. You don't need this God of the gaps. Embrace science. And if you want to live this truly moral life, embrace your humanity and enjoy the freedom that you get without God, without a God looking over your shoulder, exercising moral oversight, handing you commandments. It's not to say that you don't have morality, but your morality comes from you. It's man-made. It is societally constructed. So this is the critique of religion, of God, of Christianity that I want to lay out before turning around and beginning to systematically deconstruct it, examine all the different aspects of it, and I think in the end attempt to, well, kind of blow it out of the water.